Welcome, everyone. This is Tom Schimmer, and I am so excited to introduce you to the Tom Schimmer Podcast. This is a podcast about learning, leadership, and a little bit about life. I've been obsessed with podcasts for what seems to be the past decade or more, and had actually been thinking about starting one for the past few months. But I have to give credit to a very close friend of mine, Andrea DeVito, for bringing this idea to life. You see, this past July, Andrea and I, along with our other very close friend, Scott Edwards, were having a late-night educational shop talk session while our families were on vacation together. Now, most of my close friends are educators, and we love what we do, so these deep dives into educational topics are quite common. At one point during our conversation, Andrea turned to me and said, "You know, Tom, you should have a podcast." And that was all the nudging that I needed to put this idea into motion. So here we are. But before I share with you the plan for the podcast, I want to express how grateful I am that you've chosen to listen. You know, podcasts are nothing without listeners, so thanks for taking the time to check this one out. Obviously, there are a lot of podcasts out there, and you have a tremendous amount of choice, so thanks for thinking this one may potentially have some benefit to you. The podcast itself is going to primarily focus on current and relevant topics in K-12 education. Every Monday, I'm going to lean on my 30 years of experience to keep you informed, and maybe even a little entertained on the prevailing stories dominating the conversations about teaching and learning. Through a number of different segments, it's my hope that this podcast can be your go-to listen for educational updates, research, practices, news, and so much more. Every episode will begin with a segment I'm calling Don't At Me, but I've Got Something to Say, where I'm going to offer my perspective and opinion on a wide array of educational topics. The foundation for the podcast will be the interview, where I will invite experts on to discuss what's current in their areas of expertise. I also hope to interview expert practitioners who might not be educational household names, but who nonetheless are leaving their mark on education as well. We'll also have a segment called Assessment Corner. As many of you know, my primary area of expertise is in assessment and grading, so while the podcast itself will focus on a range of topics and issues, Assessment Corner will be a mainstay each week. This will be an opportunity for you, the listeners, to send in questions, and I'll try to provide you with some practical answers and some sound advice on how you can move forward. In the news will be a segment where I will highlight a few educational news stories from the previous week that I thought were noteworthy and maybe offer some perspective and opinion on those stories as well. And finally, the podcast will finish up with a segment I'm calling Tweets of the Week, where I will bring you the social media posts from Twitter, Facebook, and or Instagram that caught my attention. So I hope to have both an informative and enjoyable listen for you each week. And while the podcast will prioritize K-12 educational topics, I also plan to focus on leadership, educational leadership or otherwise, by exploring how leaders in any field can truly engineer a culture of continued professional growth and excellence. Now, that's going to happen mostly through the interviews, but I'll also try to sprinkle some of that throughout the other segments. And occasionally, the podcast will also explore the pursuit of success and happiness as it relates to any walk of life. Again, my goal would be to bring interviews with experts or guests and relevant stories about how we can all achieve that which we are all looking for. And that, of course, is success and happiness in whatever way you define those two things. Now, for those of you just getting to know me for the first time, I've been a classroom teacher, a school-based administrator, and a district-level leader. That was the first 20 years of my career. The past 10 years has been spent as an author, a keynote speaker, and education consultant, which has afforded me the opportunity to work with schools and districts not just in North America, but quite literally around the world. Anyway, it is my hope, as I said, that this podcast can find a place in your rotation once a week, and I hope it leaves you that much more equipped to meet the needs of learners regardless of what role you serve. You know, we've all committed our professional lives to the young people we educate, so it's my goal to make this podcast yet another place where you can learn, maybe laugh a little, and you can lead your way to excellence. So if you want to follow me on Twitter, my Twitter handle is @TomSchimmer. On Facebook and Instagram, you'll find me @SchimmerEducation. The email for the pod is tomschimmerpod@gmail.com. So if you have ideas for interview guests, segment ideas, or any feedback for me on how to make this a more enjoyable listen for you, please don't hesitate to reach out. I can't wait for episode 1, which will debut Monday, September 21st. I would be incredibly grateful if you join me, and even more grateful if you subscribe to the podcast. This is a new venture for me. I am really excited to get going, so I hope you'll choose to come along for the ride, and I hope you'll tune in on September 21st.